same page from a public display of us point of view. The YouTube, we don't have any real listeners yet. I think at some point we might. But right now, that's how we store our video for the things like this. So we're not putting it up live thinking anybody in Atlanta is actually listening besides my wife and my mother. So, and I don't think my mother knows how to use YouTube. So we're not too worried about that.
Makes two of us.
It works out well. All right. So, and if I mute, I can't mute that. I gotta mute that dinging. How do I tell my computer stop dinging? Oh well. We're pretty relaxed on most everything, and Bobby says you're a bit like us anyway, so the conversation should stroll right along. And I will come close to saying, Bobby, you hear the two of us? Do we sound similar volume? How do you compare me and Rob as we talk?
You're a little louder, but
Go figure.
go figure.
Okay. All right, and I can fix that in post-production, so that's not a problem. We're live on YouTube. We are recording. Aha, original sound for musicians. See, I click the button, it's all better, right?
That's better.
Yeah, just, yeah, tell me what I want to hear. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to close that out. Got the list of questions. Rob got those ahead of time. We won't tell anybody that, though. And I will keep it pretty simple. I think that was one of my one of the advices in Rob's book. And we will say here and here. Okay, and we're okay. So what I want to do is first of all say thank you. And again, the video is just kind of right now for posterity. We store it just because at some point we might go back and say, oh yeah, okay, I want to actually watch that, or maybe it becomes valuable to have that kind of long form interview if you'd like to watch the original, long video. Or it seems to be going that way in and as you know, Rob, doing all the YouTube videos you've done, you understand how the video is so much more than the audio. And then previously the audio was more the video killed the radio star kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think
it's funny that the research shows all about length of time that people watch. At first I was like, any view is good view, but it's like they want you to be on there for the extended period of time.
Yeah, and that's good to hear, because Bobby and I have that target when we do our stuff. It's like, okay, I want 1 minute, because I just don't see anybody listening for longer than a minute. They'll watch an hour.
Yeah.
We say, Bobby, like 60 1-minute videos, and they'll watch all of them. But if you give them 1 hour long video, there's no way they're staying the whole time. There and there. Okay, so if we go first, I guess I'll ask the obvious question, because I want to start in the beginning. And I say, Rob Carver, we brought you on. I really appreciate it. It's really great to be here, kind of thing, right? But to say I tried to do a little research. I couldn't find much more. There's actually not a lot about you online. It's actually trying to find out anything I can about Bobby Schindler. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, you guys really don't exist other than your USPTA number. But I know we've all got history. I know Rob, I finally figured out going through the book, which I really appreciate. It's been fun to go through. And then Bobby even gave me a little insight. You went to Barry, as you share in the book, but you went to Barry with John Hanna. Is that correct?
Yeah. We were doubles partners, actually.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, we've got some stories that I don't know if we can share online, but
no. We'll leave it at that. We will leave it at that. That's if we get you and John on, and you guys want to both agree to share.
There we
go. We'll do that at some point. That'd be a lot of fun.
That'd be a day-long seminar.
I'm sure. Bunch of talkers on at the same time.
Exactly.
And I'm sure some great stories. But I try to do my due diligence, kind of find out a bit about you. But there's not a lot out there, and I compare it to Bobby as well. I'm like, for me, I'm more of an open book. There's a lot more. Maybe it's just something about how I do my business where there's a lot. I'm easier to learn about. So we're stuck basically just asking you. So we're gonna have to trust you to tell us about you. So if I say, who are you and why do we care? Who is Rob Carver?
I guess I'm on the ground floor with everybody in Atlanta with, the hours that you put in on the tennis court. That, that's what the reps of the tennis equipment industry talk about, that, the pros on the ground level. We're out there with people on a daily basis, hourly basis. somebody asked me a question one time about what type of racket does Roger Federer use? And I showed them and they said, oh, wow. And so basically we are the presence in people's faces, so to speak. We're right there with them every day. And so instead of just writing an article and a tennis magazine and you know that person's name from a magazine, you get to, I'm like Bobby. You see me every day out there on the court.
Face to face.
You got it.
I like it. And so we're jumping in. The interesting thing, the main reason I heard about you, and I mean, I've known your name for 20 years now. I don't think you and I have ever been in the same room at the same time, unless it was a pro-am and I was young and I don't remember. But it's fun when we get to do these talks, and it's fun to say, oh my gosh, yeah, I know that guy, but I don't think I happen to have not played against him.
Right.
We've just never bumped into each other. You live in essentially Atlanta area, but you're probably an hour away from where I am.
Exactly.
Feels like forever, but you're promoting a book. And when Bobby told me that, I was all excited. Sweet. This is exactly what we like to do, which is, the local coach sharing his knowledge, and in a very straightforward way. I think one of my favorite tips you put in the book is you reworded what Bobby would usually call keep it simple, stupid. And you call it keep it simple and straightforward.
Correct.
And I like that because the book is a lot of that. The book is just, here it is. I give you what I got, and I've got to ask kind of that first question that comes to mind as I go through the book. I'm like, all right, you didn't just sit down and take a year off and write this thing and come up with 366 tips. This had to have been notes throughout the years. When did you decide it was a collection good enough to share with everybody?
It just hit me one time. I was doing some daily devotionals, and where the whole thing came about was that we feed our brain in a bunch of different ways every day, but not many tennis players think about, how do I get better when I'm off the court? And I thought, if it's a rainy day, instead of watching an hour tennis instruction video or just watching a tennis match, this is something that you could literally have in your racket bag. And I've had a couple of people send me pictures that they're sitting on the court waiting for the lesson or their match to show up or their partner to show up, and they're reading the book. It came about just that, a friend of mine, one of my mentors said, what's your purpose of this book? And I said, well, if I left this earth tomorrow, there's something for my tennis students to always have with them. And, and I think we are guilty. We've all done this before on the court, when we're on the court and we're explaining something and we just go on this diatribe. And about 30 seconds in, most adults have lost their focus. So get to the point, land the plane, even though we're passionate about sharing the information. So I thought, I've always liked Harvey Mackay as an author because he'll have 66 chapters and each chapter of the book is 3 pages. I'm thinking I could read that book instead of a 45-page chapter. So I really wanted just some bullet points for people. And, if you come away from a lesson, I'll ask this a lot of times to the group, give me one takeaway from today. What's one thing you learned? And then, sometimes people sit there and think, that's all you want us to remember? Yeah, just take one thing, because as a player that when the ball's in play, you can't have 20 different thoughts going through your head.
That is awesome. We do the same thing with our beginner kids. We work mostly with beginner 10 and unders, and that's often the last thing. I'm holding the candy, the what we call the bribery. I'm like, okay, so what'd you learn today? Give me one thing. It's always just one thing. I'm sure Bobby does something similar.
Well, it's from an educator standpoint, it's proven that everybody remembers the first thing you introduce. After the second thing you introduce in a lesson, the retention drops exponentially. So one thing is a good thing to remember.
Absolutely. And the time, and I remember I did the same thing. And it'll be fun to watch the progression of the book and how often we get to see it on court. Because I had a similar realization in 2007, and doing my book, I did the same thing. I'm like, well, let me at least write it down, because my point of view was I keep saying the same thing over and over again. Over and over again. Here it is. Try this. Try this. Okay, that didn't work. All right, try this. Try this. If I just write it down, here you go. For some reason, you can't seem to remember when I tell you the same thing over and over again. So we'll just write it down. And I love what you've done here, because you've just written it down. Said, here you go. And it's not exhaustive. I mean, I think of Jorge Capistani. We spoke with him late last year, and he says, I've got, 2,000 drills on, in my catalog. He's like, I probably couldn't name 10 of them right now. So the great part about writing these things down is you do have it forever. And we talk about a legacy, and we talk about leaving something, if not just for our kids or for our family, but really for our clients as a business. And we're in the business of that lasting memory of somebody saying, hey, what would Rob tell me to do? And you personalize it in the book where you bring a lot into it and say, okay, well, Johnny did this and Jamie did that. And then you bring in the tip from the real life story. I've got to know if that's is that the kind of thing that you thought about afterwards? Somebody said, you should probably personalize this. Or that was within you of saying, oh, you know what? This is an easier way. This is just a better way to share the story, knowing that it'd be a little bit more memorable to personalize it for the reader.
My intent was to, I guess, not glorify, but just give respect to my clientele that on a daily basis, we learn from our students at the same time. A lot of the tips in the book, I'll use a quote from somebody, and there's a learning aspect from everything. It's not so much the technical. If you're picking up this book to find out where your elbow should be on a topspin forehand, it's not for you. It's more the mental nuggets. But to your point about the clients, I wanted to honor them, that I saw this in this lesson. Debbie did this, John did this, Steve did this, whatever. And actually going through the editing process, I was told that I was using too many names, but I wanted to use every person I've worked with. And but they know, and it's funny because I kept a tally of, most popular names, and it's only first names, so no one could ever get mad, but the names are in a positive light, so nobody should get mad about it. But saying that, going back to your point, as far as, we want to get nuggets for people, that as I've evolved as a pro, I took something from Joe Paterno. Apparently he would spend over an hour and a half trying to figure out what he could say to college students, college football players, to be the most impactful. And I tried to evolve and say the most impactful thing with as few words possible. So if I gave you 20 different instructions, you're like, what the heck did he just say? If I just said, aim higher, something simple like that, and that's an easier way for a player to absorb the tip and the strategy at the same time.
Definitely. And I think that's an experience thing that we get over time. I remember being young. I'm like, okay, well, there's that thing and I can fix it. And I'd say it one way and they wouldn't understand. I'm like, okay, I can say it differently. And say it a different way and they still wouldn't get it. Okay, I can say it differently. But 25 years into teaching, you've got enough experience. I use my own number. And 25 years into teaching for me, I've got enough experience now to be able to know I can zoom out on all those different ways to say it and find one really good either example as you do. Like you create the actual example of the situation, not just, hey, you should aim a little bit higher over the net. Well, you bring about where the person is and where their hat is and actually aim, like give me a visual, you give me an example of that one thing that I can do to help me remember that one tip of, like you said, aim higher. But if you just say aim higher, there's no context, right? It doesn't tell me when, it doesn't tell me why, it doesn't tell me how to picture it. So I really appreciated that about what you did because I could tell there's experience there as a coach to be able to just not only come up with 366 things to say, that's impressive in and of itself, and write them all down. Like Bobby and I have probably come up with 366 things, maybe. Well, I just like to use the same ones over and over again. But we might have, but we certainly haven't written them down. Because that's the diligence that I really appreciate. You talked about the daily devotion. It's that one thing we do every day to make ourselves a little bit better. And I think at the end of this, you had to have felt good when you finally finished it and said, I think I got it. Like somebody, what did I read that was it your daughter that helped you with some of the editing?
Yeah, she's an amazing writer and she's a very bright kid. She's a junior at Georgia. And one of my mentors about the book, he said, I'll edit it for you. He's a longtime friend from baseball fantasy camp that I met. His name's Roy Berger. Shout out to Roy. But he said he would edit it for me. And then he sent it back and he said, holy cow, I didn't realize how much you have here. I don't really have the time to edit your book. And so looking at the editing costs and so forth, and my daughter writes so well. It was a fun thing going back and forth every night. we're both night owls, and sometimes 12:30 at night, we're on Google Docs going back and forth. And she said, "Dad, this doesn't make sense." And I said, "Well, it does from a tennis perspective, you know." And so, and it was fun. It was a lot easier to work with my daughter instead of somebody that I didn't know. And it was kind of very special to do it. And but you know, the whole process was a different ball of wax to me. It's just like, okay, I can put the tips on paper, and my family gave me a hard time because I was in the kitchen writing it down. And they're like, "Dad, why don't you just type it one time?" And I said, "No, when I go back and type it, I'm going to edit my own stuff." And and a funny thing happened when I started to type it. I started getting tennis elbow because I was on the keyboard and I don't work on the computer or type much. And I thought, what a wimp that if my clients hear that I got tennis elbow from typing instead of lifting weights or something, you know, strenuous on the muscle. But
That is the actual most bizarre tennis injury.
well, no, that's in the book, and you read that.
I know.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. I've never known anybody ripping a couple arteries. That was a good one. Yeah.
But in your case, you got tennis elbow from the computer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you've done your homework. That's good work.
I appreciate that. And I got a technical question, and the reason I went towards your editor is we all have a way of speaking. We all have our own unique speech pattern on the court. Bobby's got his as a coach. I mean, we're all USPTA certified, so in theory, we're all the same, right? But we're not even remotely the same. And how we do things and how we talk. And I had the same question. I probably would not have gone to a family member for editing, other than the fact that I love the fact that you were able to spend that much time with your daughter while she's in college. Like, that's family. You can't get that back. Like, that is right. Absolutely wonderful. But she's also going to be familiar with your speech patterns. And there were a couple of times as I was going through the book, I'm reading it with my wife, and a couple of times I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have done that as an editor. And that's the first time I checked back. I'm like, all right, hang on, who edited this thing? It was somebody who knows your speech patterns. Because there's a time I'm like, well, I would have put a comma there. I wonder why. But it was your daughter knows what you meant to say. And I'm sure there was a time, because I have the same thing when I write, when I have somebody that knows me looking up going, Sean, this is how you talk. And writing is very different. And you have that one paragraph, maybe two paragraphs kind of tip in here that's really easy to get through. I really like it. You pick it up, read one, 30 seconds, and you've got something you can work with, which I really like. But there was a time I recognized the speech pattern that might have flown through a sentence that I do the same thing. I'm sure Bobby does as well. And I don't know if Bobby does much writing. But it's a very different thing when you put it down and you have someone who doesn't know you. It's like getting the new tennis coach. You've had that new player come in to play with you on the court. You have to get to know each other, not just as a person, but just communicating.
Yeah, well, she was so good because she helped me with brevity. That she said, "Dad, there's too much in here," and I was thinking, "No, but this person I'm talking about, this, blah, blah, blah." And here I go running off the mouth again. And then she's like, "Dad, just keep it right there." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, baby girl." So, yeah. But, you know, one of my friends said, cut my head off and I can talk about sports forever. You know, we're all passionate about, what we do on a daily basis. And, I appreciate you guys and what you're doing. And when Bobby and I talked last year, I thought, man, that's awesome what you guys are putting together. I think Atlanta and, we are so strong in Atlanta with our tennis. The whole world doesn't even appreciate how intense it is. And, what you guys are doing, I think I give you guys a lot of props for going out there the way you guys are putting this whole thing together.
We appreciate that and love to get you involved as much as possible. And like I said, when Bobby said, "Hey, Rob wrote a book," at first I was like, "Oh no, not another local guy who thinks he can write a book." And then he told me what it was, because I'm the same. I was, 15 years ago, I was the local guy writing a book and nobody cared. So it's really cool now to see this and how well it's done and how well it was done, like how well you accomplished it. And how, again, I don't want to say simple in a negative way, but simple and straightforward. We're all talkers. You could probably talk an hour on each of these tips. You can get 366 lessons just from this book over an hour, because each one has so many intricacies, and we can tell 30 different examples and really be able to drive it home. But to keep it simple and keep it right there. Just give me that little thing that not a lot of tennis coaches are really able to do, is to keep that brevity and really narrow it down and say, here's what you need to hear.
Well, my brother kept me grounded. He said, I didn't even think you could read a book, much less write one. So,
oh, ouch.
Older brothers are like that. So,
ouch.
Yeah.
So, Rob, you work out of East Cobb area, am I correct?
East Cobb and Roswell, a little bit of both.
And how is your breakdown? Kids, adults, privates, groups, everything, or is there something you prefer?
You know what? It doesn't matter. Somebody asked me one time, who do you prefer to teach? Basically, it's a willing student. I had a little 7-year-old yesterday. He was a handful, but when we connected, it was great. He's a high maintenance kid, and it was an intense, long 30 minutes, but it was fun to connect. Whereas working with adults, I usually teach ladies in the morning, and then juniors in the afternoon, and then finish the day with adults, either women or men. So I don't care who I teach. It's just, if you have the right attitude and you want to get better, it's fun to teach. So is it easier to coach the better players? Sometimes, but there's something great about molding clay, is what I call it, like a beginner player, and then you can see him progress. And then when you look at the really good player, it might be just a slight tweak. I had a guy last night who's gotten really good, but I can see right before he hits his shot on a slower ball, he gets very tight. And I told him, I said, listen, your biggest demon is within you. And he looked at me kind of strange, like, what's wrong with me? I said, listen, you are so intense with trying to do it the right way. I said, you are too tense when you hit. I said, all I want you to do is just tell yourself, loosen up and just let that top spin go. And it's, those are the fun things, the little nuggets. And that's kind of where the whole book thing came about.
Well, that's the God's honest truth. And I loved your schedule, by the way. There's the typical Atlanta tennis pro who's on the court every day. We're on the court in the morning. We got a couple hours off in mid-afternoon, and we come back on when the kids are getting off from school. And then you got a couple hours of adults, and that's your day. And that's your day.
Right.
At
Long
least
days for good days.
long days, but good days. Exactly. But that is the demo. People always are amazed. Well, you don't work weekends. Well, everybody's playing on weekends. We don't work that much on weekends. Our meat and potatoes is Monday through Wednesday. You fill in around Thursday, and then Friday kind of come down fun day to get everybody charged up for the weekend. So there's the grind Atlanta tennis instructor right there. But not only, Rob, you're leaving out this part. You still play competitively, because I know the teams you're on and the guys that you play with, and I work with a couple of them, and they never give up playing. So you're still out there grinding as well.
Yeah, it's one of my buddies that works at a resort said, why do you still play? It's like if you play guitar in a band, but you don't tour anymore, you still like to play guitar. There's something fun about it, and get that energy. And then you realize, it's not as intense winning and losing, even though, your day's not ruined as much if you lose, but you still feel better when you win. And it's, I said this years ago, I'm never going to be the fat Elvis on the court saying what I used to do years ago. I think you need to walk the walk as much as you talk the talk, and not that you have to play competitively, but I think you owe it to your clientele to stay in some relatively decent physical shape, because I think it also helps us teach better too, because it can be a grind.
I used to say something similar to the kids. Adults is a different thing. You don't usually make adults do push-ups, but I used to say similar things to the kids. Say, I will never ask you to do something I'm unwilling to do myself.
Right. Exactly.
I think I got that from Dennis Horde, Bobby. Not that he said it or he was offering it, but I think being around him, there was that bit of, you know what, we need to be able to do this with the kids. But I still need to be able to hit with some decent players. Whether I'm Bobby, Bobby, you don't play much at all, if at all, and Rob, you're still out there as much as you can, from what I hear, which is why I'm surprised we haven't bumped into each other. Maybe you're on better teams. I don't know.
I've been ducking you, man.
I don't think anybody's avoiding me. That's probably not a thing that happens out there.
Well, Rob, I don't know if you've noticed, on several occasions, Sean has now made it blatantly obvious that he's at least 10 years younger than us. So, right? We have juniors. You have a junior in college. I have one in high school. He has a newborn. He's been teaching 25 years. We're probably closer to 35 years. So he's been digging us just, a little bit. remind, hey, I'm still the young guy here. So
Yeah, that's okay.
and that goes back to Sean. Rob and I met, and I think it was Pro-Am, probably, what do you think, around 97 or 98? Was it
Yeah,
nine? It was a
that was
rock
Atlanta
channel.
Athletic Club,
The
right? It
Atlanta
was
Athletic Club.
the cure Ace Out Leukemia. I think it was summer of '97, actually. Yeah.
So it was a long time. Rob won thankfully I didn't have to play in the same flight. He won the higher flight and I won the beginner flight with my
Yeah.
so we got the ball and had a good time. But that tells you how long ago we've already met. It's like,
Yeah.
start doing the numbers, like, darn, that's more than 25,
Right.
26 years that we've
That's
known
right.
each other. So
Wait a minute. I thought John Hanna won all the pro-ams.
Nah, Johnny Pro-Am, baby.
that's it. John taught us all well. He's like, hey man, we get paid to play tennis. Go do it. Like,
There you go.
The ones he takes off, he lets somebody else win a few.
well, you know, and Rob could speak to it. John, the nicest guy in the world, is as competitive as can be. And, you know, the first time you hit with him, how did the two hands on both sides grip you?
Yeah, that was crazy. First time I met him, like, what's up with that? But
Yeah.
yeah, he pulled it off pretty well.
Yeah, he can return a serve. So, yes. And let's be clear, I love to hit the ball. I just don't have the shoulder that allows me to play. As Rob alluded to earlier, he likes to go to baseball fantasy camps. I spend a little too much time on a pitcher's mound, and at my age, serving is not easy. You get to hear the arthritis.
Yeah, I mean, zero disrespect on whether you play every weekend. You know, if Rob's out there every weekend and Bobby, you never play a match. I've played one match in 3 years. You know, I'm slowing down with my competitive tennis as well. So it's not disrespect at all to say you don't play very often. It's more of a style, and I think that's one of the interesting things about Atlanta tennis, as Rob you were alluding to earlier, is how unique it is here that we don't all have that I've got to go out and compete all the time mentality, because it's so much of a business and we're on court so much that at some point when you get home at night, you may not want to think, oh man, it's Friday night, I've had a long week, I can't wait to go play AA1 tomorrow morning. Like, get up in the morning and stretch and be ready for that. I might just want to sleep in and hang out with my kids.
But it's in my world, it's kind of a therapy. It's just to let it out. And I told somebody that I heard this at a seminar years ago, that tennis is a legal way to hit the hell out of something, that, you know, and it's to end the day with a very good student that you get to mix it up with and hit a little bit, you get the blood flowing, because a lot of times our professions, like working retail, that you're standing there so much and your legs get flat. I found that if I hit with somebody or do like this afternoon, I'm planning to do some footwork because it's 40 degrees. I'll do the footwork with the kids to warm up mainly. And then you get this little bit surge of energy. And, you know, the kids will always ask me in the winter, why are we doing ladder drills? I'm thinking, because I'm freezing over here.
Because I'm cold. Exactly.
Yeah. But to your point, it's fun to hit the tennis ball. And if you're not competing, just to serve and play a few points with somebody. And I think the clients appreciate it. And sometimes, you know, I've got 3 ladies or 4, I'll jump in and play some points with them. They like that. But I just think it's fun to hit the tennis ball.
Yeah,
Now,
I think we're both the same way.
And do you bring that to your teaching, Rob? Because I mean, I'm the same way. I'm playing a long time. I played probably more baseball than tennis when I was growing up. So I still just love to hit the ball. I remember being at a pro-am, watching TJ Middleton play, surrounded by great players. But yet when the ball came off TJ's racket, it was just that much cleaner. And that's always been my goal. I wanted just for 5 minutes hit, like TJ did that one day, just to have that sound. But do you bring that to your clients in that energy? And I think that rubs off on them. They say, you know, like you said, if they're willing, and I always say to people, look, I'm not an acquired taste. If you're willing, I'm a good guy for you. If you're here for other reasons, I might not be the right guy for you, because I'm going to get them out here with a lot of energy. And I know I've seen you in action, and I know you bring a lot of intensity and a lot of energy to a lesson.
You know, my background, I started tennis relatively late. I really got into tennis at 13, but my love was basketball, and I played a lot of baseball, and which was a good crossover thing for me. And I relate that to parents. It's really difficult to be picking one sport at age 7 and think you're going to be a college athlete these days, much less a professional. But what helped me was I wasn't that great at tennis. The backhand felt natural, and I learned how to serve. That felt sort of natural, but I had to work on the technique, of course. But learning from other sports and where I struggled in tennis, I had to be curious. Why was I a better baseball player and better basketball player than this dude who just kicked my butt in tennis? That drove me crazy. What made him good? And so I think our experiences as players helps relay that to players now. Say, listen, you can win today if you're not hitting the ball well. Well, instead of always feeling like, and I tell people all the time, forget about winning. You have one job. That's to make your shot to your intended target. What do you do if that ball comes back? Well, then you have another intended target, or maybe it's the same target, because you cannot think about winning. Well, everybody wants to win, but how do you win? You have to backtrack that. I need to make my shots. And then it comes into, okay, you won this point. Now we need to win the next point because we got to get 2 in a row. So I think it doesn't matter. And I like to read other coaching books, listen to different seminars from other sports. One thing I picked up on, and you and I were discussing this about junior players. One of my friends and I, we were talking at a seminar recently, like, how do we get kids to work harder? And I took something from Gino Ariema, the Connecticut women's basketball coach. One of his players said, if you can get through one of his practices, the game is easy.
Absolutely.
And when I feed a ball to a kid and make them run, they say, hey, that's not fair, or that's a bad feed. And I've even told adults, there's no such thing as a bad feed, because your opponent's not going to give you a good feed.
Right.
And I think we need to take real competition, mix that into the lesson. And every now and then I'll slice a ball to somebody on a feed, and they look at me like, that was rude. And that, what are you doing to me? And it's like, well, your opponent might slice it to you. Or you give them a big, I call meatball, a big high floating ball, and all of a sudden they get impatient. Well, that girl's going to do that to you in the match, or the guy's going to, slice or lob you, whatever. So I think it's helpful for us to take things from other sports and put that into tennis, to where you can make a situation difficult like it's a match in practice. So now when they come to the real match, they're not freaked out.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
also good that you're practicing what you preach, so to speak. I mean, it's as a coach and a player. Say, I'm out there doing it also. Say, these things that I share with you, this is what I do. This is how I'm successful on the court. And I think there's some legitimacy in that, as opposed to just being the theoretical teacher that just says, well, in theory, here are your angles and here's the thing that's supposed to happen, but I have no actual empirical evidence that this is going to work. Right? To be able to say, oh my gosh, I've got to give you an example from my match this weekend. I enjoyed that as much, to be able to say, here's what we did. You know what? I was really struggling, and one of your tips took me there. I was really struggling, just couldn't find a target. So I went back to one of my old school ideas, and I just hit the ball over the net strap for about 3 games in a row. Right, everything over the net strap. And all of a sudden, we're back on serve. So I take the example of having it work as a player. I think the players and your clients, the people on court, your students, would probably appreciate that a lot.
Well, it's crazy that you said that every single match I play, this sport reveals something to me. It might not be that, hey, if you hit the ball here, it goes like this. It might be an approach, something that you just tell yourself, hey, relax on this return to serve. All of a sudden you time the return to serve and you hit it really well. Where the last return to serve, you were real tight, you're trying to force it. Every single time I play, I learned something. And it's like, it's amazing what can happen within that 36 by 78 foot rectangle.
So how do you get that, which I completely agree with, the idea of the patience, and that is, it is going to take some time in a world that wants everything yesterday, dealing with adults and children on both, because as a coach, we know that coaching is really a relationship, and to get the full gusto out of the relationship, it's going to take some time in all probability, because it's going to require some trust. And a lot of folks aren't willing to give that. How much do you think that's hurting the game today?
I just had a conversation with a mom last Friday whose daughters, she's got 2 middle school daughters. One's in high school, one's in middle school. And they took about 2 years of tennis. They got into tennis through COVID, and one's a swimmer, one's playing softball. And the mom said, she's getting pretty good at this sport, but she said, kids don't understand today. They get frustrated when it's not easy right away. And I told her, I said, that's right. I said, we've got to find ways for kids to understand nobody's an expert right away. They think that they can win real fast. And I think phones are part of that, that everything is all, you get this dopamine when you send off a tweet or a picture on Instagram and all that. And I think, okay, if you take the statistics, 70% of all points on the Pro Tour are ended by a mistake. Now, they might make the whole point look better, but it's a failure sport, very similar to baseball. 70% of the points are lost. You look at baseball, if you succeed 3 out of 10 times, you're still failing 7 out of 10 times at the plate. And if you succeed,
but you're in the Hall of Fame.
You're in the Hall of Fame.
In the Hall of Fame, sure.
Exactly. So I think, okay, losing's good. You have to learn from losing. And you also want to learn from winning too. But going back to, if you're on the court, you've got to understand that you need to make your shot. It's not so much about how great your shot is. It's what can I do to make that person uncomfortable and try to force losing. And that is hard. And it's like on a daily basis. Now, I started doing something about a year ago. I did this last summer and it was very successful. Where I was in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, I have 2 courts, one court shady and one sunny. So middle of July, what are you going to do? You got the shady court. So I told these kids, and they were about 7 years old, they were starting to whine about the heat. And meanwhile, the pool is right behind the courts. And then all they can think about is when's the ice cream man coming by and when can I get in the pool? And they're 7 and 8 years old for an hour lesson. And I said, hey guys, you see that court over there? And they're looking at me like it's the devil or something. I said, yeah, it's hot over there. That's the sunny court. I said, if you complain at all about the heat, we're going to the sunny court and you don't get water breaks. Now, of course, I'm going to give the kids water breaks. And the parents heard me. And the parents were like, really? He's going to do that? Well, not one kid complained. And every 10 minutes, they got water and everything was fine. You set the parameters up, say, yeah, this is going to be difficult, but it could be worse. So the other thing I started doing with kids is, the younger kids, when we do a basket of balls, just to keep score, whoever wins the most points gets to choose which side of the court they're going to pick up. So obviously the team that wins will go to the side where there's fewer balls to pick up. So one day after the team that won, they're so happy because they only had to pick up 30 balls. The other 120 are on the other side. And so I took the basket of balls instead of in the middle of the court, and I put it way over on the baseline by the team that had to pick up the most balls. And as soon as the kids that were picking up the 20 balls saw where I put the basket, they're like, that's not fair and all this stuff. I said, listen, you got to find a way to win. You got an obstacle, overcome it. And then when I put the kids together at the net afterwards, I said, the Navy SEALs have a mantra, you find a way to win. There's going to be difficult things. Winning is the only option in war. You either win or you die. And the kids are like, yeah. And I said, so next time something's difficult, I don't need to hear the wah-wah, you find a way to win. And that's the thing, in a tennis match, things are going to go bad. Someone's going to call it a bad call. It's going to be on the line and and they're going to call it out. You got to deal with it. And I think when we do little things like that for kids and tell them, listen, it's going to be hard out here and make conditions hard. A team starts to win. It starts to dominate. That's where we tweak it as a pro and make it even tougher for them to win. And it's not mean. And I think our society, all we want is kids to feel good. And we have to be the bad guys sometimes that listen, mom and dad, if you want your kid to get better, this isn't the military, but we've got to learn some lessons out here. The tennis is a tough game. And, one-on-one, I mean, it's the craziest thing to me in tennis. It's like a war. You against me. I didn't like the way you called it, whatever. I didn't like the way you looked at me and you beat me. And I'm supposed to go up to the net and go, oh, shucks. Good job. Thank you. Congratulations for kicking my butt. That's hard to do, but that's what we have to deal with. And I think we can train kids to go through that and adults at the same time.
I like the boxing metaphor. I use that more than war. I think it was J.J. Wolf was quoted as saying, he was drawn to it as that boxing mentality, that one-on-one kind of thing. But I really like what you said about the obstacles, and that was one of the tips in the book was the 4 obstacles. And I've been doing this a long time, and I hadn't considered the infinite amount of options that you have of ways to miss a shot as an obstacle. And I like how you did it. You say, okay, you got the net as an obstacle. That's a thing, right? We always see the picture hanging on the wall. If you have obstacles in your way and it's a mountain, right? There's always a thing in your way. But you actually took the obstacle and said, okay, you got the thing that's the net. You got 2 opponents. But that other obstacle could be 100 things. It could be your own mental struggle. It could be your stress. Could be... right? But you picked the infinite space there is to miss is actually, I thought that was a really interesting obstacle to overcome. I mean, it sounds good that you, like you say, you talk to the kids, you talk to adults in the same way. This could always be worse from a heat point of view, from a cold. We want these kids to work hard. We want our clients to work hard because this is the time to work. I think it wasn't Windermere, Bobby. It was, what's the other, Windward? It was Cannon Campbell back in the day had that phrase. He said, train hard, win easy. And like you said, work hard today, going into your match the next day is easy.
Well, you can't, I don't think in any sport can you say, well, I'll hustle for that in a real match, or I'll do this in the
Oh yeah, I would have tried. I would have tried.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. If this was the match, I'd have gone for that. Well, it's not a light switch, man. It's like Kevin Garnett had a saying when he was a kid on the playground, in between the lines, it's all about the business. I'm like, yeah, every time you walk inside that gate, it's not war, but it's a battle right here. And we, it's not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice.
I like that. That's my wife and I go back and forth because I call it, practice doesn't make perfect. Only perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
And my wife likes to say practice makes permanent.
Right.
So
Great.
even if you practice it wrong, guess what? You're going to be permanently installing wrong. I like it. We've all got those phrases that we use, and we've perfected, so to speak, our phrases. But even, and I talk with Bobby a lot, obviously, and even us at where we are in our careers, we're still learning. Like you said, you're even out there on the court learning when you play a match. You're out there with your students learning from them, and we're always adjusting. I think you made a comment a few minutes ago about something I started doing this year. And I think that's fantastic because I do the same thing. I'm like, you know what, this year I'm going to implement this. And I think about, okay, this is how I operate now, but that doesn't necessarily mean I was as good at doing this as I think I was 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, and I think we owe it to our students that if I ask them to train and apply themselves and evolve, that it's up to us as pros to be better. And looking back and you go, wow, I was terrible 20 years ago. Well, maybe I was okay for it at the time and it worked then, but that's where you go to seminars and you learn different things. And if you know 25 ways to teach a forehand and you hear one nugget at a seminar, now you have 26. That might be huge for somebody.
That's why I'm excited about the book. Because I look at Bobby, I'm like, we've been doing this a long time and we all think we're good at this. I joked with the kids the other day. I'm like, there's nothing about tennis I don't know. And then I thought about your book sitting in the house near the courts. I'm like, hang on, I'm sure I'm going to go learn something tonight. So we've got to be humble when it comes to what we don't know.
Yeah. One of my brother's best friends, who's a baseball coach, who's a great guy, he said what he knows about baseball is this much. He said, it's a big world. He said he knows this much and he knows that, but it's a big world. And that's true. And it's people come up with stuff all the time and it might be crazy, but it might connect with somebody. So it's fun to try different things too.
Sometimes it works. Exactly. Bobby, I want to go to my favorite question coming up. You got anything before I hit my favorite question?
No, because we've said we're going to try to keep these relatively short. So
exactly.
We could go on forever here. So we'll try to bring it in a little bit.
Okay. And Rob, I know at the end, I want to ask, I don't know if you've got, and I'll ping you for it at the end, but I'll prime you for it now. I don't know how all the ways, your outlets for selling the book. I don't know if you've got a few hundred of them in your garage that you're able to sell and give away, or if it's only on Amazon. So at the end, I want to make sure you let everybody know how they can get the book. I know it's on Amazon. That's where I can obviously find it because that's where everything comes from. But if there are other ways, if there are local ways, I know at GoTennis, we've got ability to market and publish as well. So we might ask you and say, hey, can we get 10% off for our listeners or for our GoTennis members? So I'll prime you for coming up with that. But before that, I want to ask my favorite question, and we sent it to you ahead of time. So I know you're well prepared. I'm sure you've lost sleep over the answer because no, I'm sure you haven't, because we're all guys that can probably answer this question without priming. But if you were king of tennis, is there something you would change? Whether it's the world, whether it's just Atlanta, if you were king of tennis, is there anything that you would really love to see different about what happens, like I said, either all over the world or just in Atlanta, whatever target you would take.
Yeah, I think it works on the recreational, and also my second part of the response would be to the professional level. I would get rid of the let on a serve. Yeah, they do that in NCAA because they were basically just screwing each other in NCAA years ago. So, ace, no, that was a let.
You're
And they
not cheating, you're not
about it.
trying.
Yeah, so I would get rid of lets. If the ball hits the net on the serve, that's your fault. And if it slows it down, the returner comes up and pounds it. Well, you shouldn't hit the net on the serve. So I would get rid of that. Number two, specifically for the Pro Tour, I'd get rid of coaching. I don't like the fact that back a couple of years ago, Serena Williams, her coach, was caught cheating. And, I think the best way to do that is to move the coaches away from the court. Why are they on the first row where they can coach? Now at the Australian Open, they're allowing coaching. And I was confused the other night. They were talking about you can only coach for so much, some short amount of time. You can't say too much. And it's kind of confusing. But one of the unique things about tennis to me is that if you figured something out about my game and you turn the match around, that's because of your experience and your wisdom. Whereas, okay, what if you're a top 10 player? You can afford Paul Annacone or Brad Gilbert or, Greg Kasha. He'll be your personal coach. Where I'm number 100 in the world and I can't afford that type of coach. So obvious right away that you've got an advantage because you've got a better coach than what I can afford. So I think the unique thing about tennis, it's mano a mano, and it's what you figure out as the match progresses. And I heard Luke Jensen talk recently. He said that Roger Federer you'd be hanging with him. You might have lost the first set 7-5 and it'd be 3-2 in the second set. All of a sudden he would change something and Roger owned you. Well, that's part of his right up here. And it's just not ball striking. We've all pulled up to the courts and said, who's that amazing hitter? Well, he hits the ball well, but he doesn't adjust very well to a slower ball. And so I think that's the unique thing about using the mental side of tennis. And it's funny, when I saw that question, I was talking to a friend of mine about it. I said, what would we do to change tennis to make it better? And one of my friends said, and I totally believe this because I like to play the net. He said, we need to incorporate the volley more. And I'll never forget back in 2008, I think it was the Sunday before Wimbledon at the French Open, the tournament director from Wimbledon said, we've made the base harder to increase rallies at Wimbledon. And coincidentally, that was the first year that Nadal won Wimbledon. And now when you look at it, nothing against Nadal, but he's a baseliner. You don't even see tread marks going towards the tee. Everything's worn out on the baseline. And I know technology, you can't change. I don't know if we could ever change the strings and keep the rackets a certain way or change the balls. I think it's great what we have. But remember when Patrick Rafter and Stefan Edberg and Johnny Mack and Sampras came to the net and versus a baseliner? How fun was that contrast? I mean, I don't remember anybody going, I wish Edberg or Rafter would stay at the baseline more. It was so fun seeing that. So I don't know. I would really go back. I would really like to see Wimbledon go back to a softer base to where the ball doesn't bounce so high to where you're compelled to come to the net instead of having all these 20-stroke rallies from the baseline on grass. But you know what? If I could tweak the U.S. Open, I'd be interested to see this. I always get frustrated. They talk about the ratings for tennis that, the U.S. Open ranked so low compared to football. What are we doing going up against NFL football and NCAA football?
Labor Day weekend.
We're crazy. Yeah. So I would do this. I would start the U.S. Open a week earlier and finish on Labor Day weekend. Sunday night, have the women's final. Monday night, everybody's getting ready to go back to work. We'd have the men's final at 5:00 or whatever. That'd be interesting to see if we could get more ratings that way before we bang up heads against football that always gets the big ratings.
Yeah, but that's a USTA thing, and we know how good they are at making decisions.
Yeah.
Bobby, what are your thoughts? I've got my thoughts, and I think we'd probably all agree on the let on the serve. I think that moves things along. I don't know that there's a huge discussion there. We probably both agree with you. But what do you think about the coaching at the ATP level? We don't talk ATP a lot here.
Well, but I think I loved what Rob brought up, that people take for granted that it's an even playing field. And the advantage the better players have is the access to the coaching, the access to the person who's booking their flights, the nutritionist, the massage therapist. It's not an even playing field. It's not remotely close. And, that's a big advantage once you get to that spot. So yeah, to keep it somewhat grounded. And again, and I agree with
Says
Rob.
the Yankees fan.
Don't go there. Don't go there. Listen, all I know is my dynasty in the 90s, that was majority homegrown and a great trade for a real Yankee, Paul O'Neill.
Okay.
So don't get me started. Those up the middle were all Yankee farm kids that came together. So just great scouting, Gene Michael. God rest in peace. Anyway, plus I was a Pirates fan. Rob, go ahead. Tell him, Rob. I'm Latin and I grew up a Clemente fan. So, we are family. I love Dave Parker. He was the reason I got my ear pierced. Anyway, I'm on a tangent, but no. So I don't like coaching, and that's what a coach is there to prepare you, put you into the arena. Now go do it. And like you said, I love the Roger Federer analogy. I remember there's a great Greg Maddux story that he talks about. He was pitching during the regular season to the guy, and the guy fouled off 20 balls in a row. And Terry Pendleton came up to him and said, dude, if you just throw it here, you'll get him. He goes, oh, I know that, but I think we're going to face these guys in the playoffs, so I don't want to show it to him now. And I'm like, my God, if that doesn't tell you what put Greg Maddux on a whole different level than everybody else, that he's thinking 2 months into the future, that he's going to continue to throw, and this guy might foul it off, but he needs this pitch when he needs it 2 outs in the ninth in the World Series. I was like, that to me is, whole nother, and that's what you want out of these guys. That's what I want out of my champion, something so unique. And I think that was great about the big three, that they all brought something completely different to the sport. And again, I'm disappointed, that unfortunately it became even by the way we did services, the different service. It was good to have Federer dominant at Wimbledon. It was good to have it where Nadal and Novak would go and battle it out at the French. Novak wins the Australian because I guess physically it's got to be the toughest sport, it seems, because they get to play some marathon matches, and that plays into Novak. And then the US Open's a free-for-all because of the elements, the surface, the 2 weeks in New York. It's
whose knees still work at that point.
Yeah, it's right. The end of the season, it's a whole different set of dynamics. That's what makes the sport great. So
well, I'll take a different. I'll take the other side. I haven't thought through all my. I haven't come to an opinion on coaching at the professional level, but I can make an argument for the coaching and why I do. One of the ways I do like it is I think it does the coaching on court. I think it does level out the coaching for the players at the time, where Rob says, "Hey, not everybody can afford Paul Anacone," and I get that, but I think. And just as watching, and again, we've only had a year or so of this test that we're doing with the coaching at that level. But I like the idea that a younger player or a guy outside of the top 50 that isn't quite as good at making those adjustments, he hasn't been on tour long enough, or he really doesn't have the coaching staff to make sure they've done all their due diligence and they know what to do at 3-all in the fifth, serving in the right place like a Greg Maddux, to be able to look up and go, where do I go? What do I need to do? I think it was Tommy Paul did that the other night in his quarterfinal match, and he's like, where's he going to serve? Where's he going to serve? And the coach is up there like, cover the tee, and I do like that aspect. And again, I'm not arguing for it or against it, but I like that the player that isn't just locked in Roger Federer, I've got this kind of thing where I'm just gonna figure you out and there's nothing you can do about it. The younger player, or the player without that seriously effective and efficient coaching staff, can look up and get a little help against those guys.
So who's giving the 5'9" guy 6 more inches?
See, that's a genetic problem. I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Well, so is mental.
Can't help you. I think that's the Ben Shelton. I keep looking at my son, who's 3 months old now. I keep looking. I'm like 6'4", left-handed with a two-handed backhand. I'm going to need you to eat more. Like at that point, you just end up with a physical side of things, and that's I'm calling it my new favorite tennis player is Ben Shelton. But you just have that genetic ability. I'm only 6 feet tall. I'm not playing in the NBA. There is that scenario where I also look at my son and I say, okay, if you're only 5'7", that's okay. You can still be Hall of Fame soccer player.
Or a coach. That's what I tell the kid.
This is true.
What do I see when I see a 5'9" intense kid who's out there trying real hard? What do I call him in 10 years? Coach.
There you go. Yeah, I also want him on my team because there's a good chance that's that hard worker that I want there as part of the group. Doesn't necessarily mean he's the line one guy, winning every match, but he's probably got that working mentality that we all like. Rob, you used the phrase a willing. What did you say? A willing student.
Yeah, willing student. Yeah, the right attitude, willing to learn.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've got nothing else for you. I really enjoyed the book. I appreciate it, Rob, and I will keep going through it. I'll admit I haven't read all of them. It hasn't been. I get a year to finish
Yeah,
it.
right. Yeah, one a day, man.
I really only had a week, so I got
Right.
through a lot. But I very much enjoyed it, and I'd love to have the podcast as well. Like I said, we're not too big yet, but we're working on it, and we've got GoTennis, which is a good ability to help in our minds, as Bobby's probably shared a little bit with you, as some of the things we're doing, if not a lot of it, to be able to try to help the Atlanta area. And I think this book is a great way to do that, because I think we are, as Bobby reminds us a lot, that we're a social tennis group in Atlanta. There's not a lot of professional players come out, not even a lot of Division I high-level college players. We're not here in Atlanta churning out high-level players, but we love to be able to play with our kids. We love to play our leagues. We love our flex leagues, and we really enjoy it. And there are, I don't know, seemingly infinite amount of coaches here. So it's great to find somebody as qualified as you, Rob, to be able to say, okay, not only do I do this full time, I've been doing it full time for a while, and for us to say, hey, this is a book we can share. How are you promoting the book right now? What's going on it came out last year. What's going on for 2023 to get the book out there?
Well, like you mentioned, you can get it on Amazon. My publisher is Book Logics. It's all one word, book, and then logix.com. They've been at Your Serve Tennis. You can buy them there. We've done some book signings, and just it's online, so anybody can get it. I think I'm proud of it because of what people have responded to me saying, hey, I've gotten something from the book. And that to me means everything. And I appreciate you guys. And again, good luck with what you guys are doing. I'm glad to be a part of what you guys are doing. And it's fun to see things progress.
Rob, you got any hours available for anybody who's looking for lessons as well? Because I mean, some of the things you say, and that's what I always laugh about. You've built another podcast I love the idea of the willingness to learn. How do you impart that passion that we have to explore, challenge ourselves? How do you impart that on your kids? I think, as you and I, our comfort zone is come see it, come be a part of it. How does somebody take a lesson with you?
Well, you can reach me at 678-793-4433 or my email, robcarver@bellsouth.net. I'm busy, but there are gaps in the schedule. I'm just trying to find out, maybe one of you guys can figure it out, how we can warm it up a little bit and stop all this rain we've been having.
You and me both.
Retractable roof.
I just spoke to the city.
Figure out how to make people taller. You want to change the weather?
Come on, man.
We're just
asking, right?
guys.
You gotta ask.
That's
gotta
right.
ask. Used to be clay courts. Now we're getting smarter and say, heck with clay. Can we just get covered courts?
Indoor court.
We need indoor. Just give me some covered.
We'll work on a plan for that. I like it. Changing the weather, making people taller. Anything else?
Now we'll end it there.
I like it. Well, Rob, I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. And we'll get you back on often, because it'd be fun to bring your tips to the world as well. And we'll talk offline about how to get your tips onto the podcast more consistently. Maybe we can borrow one a month or something, and we'll
Sounds great.
help you continue to promote. And we will definitely be in touch, because we want to get you involved with GoTennis and that lesson book idea that we can send everybody. Rising tide is one of the things I like to say. We haven't been able to codify that. I don't think anybody else is excited about that reference, but I like that. I like the idea of saying, hey, we don't need the zero-sum game idea of the tennis coach that says, okay, well, the players all have to come to me. Like, I have to take all the lessons. I'd like to have more of, hey, you know what? I know a great coach out in Marietta. I'm in Buford. Like, I can't help you. And really be able to help each other out and get that network and get that working in Atlanta. I think you're a great fit for that, because you get what we're trying to do, trying to improve what's going on here in Atlanta. Even though it's already great, there's always a way to make things better. So I appreciate your time, and we will definitely stay in touch.
Thank you, guys.